Ukraine just outsourced its air defense to the private sector, and it's actually working. In the director's cut of the movie Aliens, there's a scene in that film where colonial marines set up automated turrets in a hallway to kill anything that moves.
Those ammo counters go. B guns down 50%.
I watched that as a kid and I thought, why does this seem science fiction? We should be doing this now. Ukraine apparently had the same thought, except they didn't stop at the automated turret part. They also decided to hand air defense responsibilities to private companies, let volunteers run counter-drone weapons under military command and control, and build the whole thing into a functioning system in the middle of an active war. And it is working. Let's talk about what Ukraine just built, why it matters, and why the rest of the world should be paying very close attention. By the way, I stumbled on this story at Defense Express. Take a look if you're feeling froggy. It's a great news source. Hey friends, Wes here, Army infantry and Air Force veteran, and the only defense journalist on YouTube who has watched the Aliens director's cut enough times to consider it professional research. And what makes this story interesting isn't that Ukraine is shooting at drones. You've heard me say that sentence enough times to file a noise complaint. What makes this different is who's doing the shooting. Ukraine is starting to treat air defense less like a military specialty and more like a national utility. Private companies can now build their own air defense groups, train their people, get certified by the Ministry of Defense, receive weapons from state stocks, and plug directly into Ukrainian Air Force command and control networks. These aren't random dudes on a factory roof with a machine gun and good intentions. They're tied into a larger defensive architecture. One company in Kharkiv has already done it and reportedly shot down Shaheds and Zala drones. 13 more companies are in the pipeline. So the real story here isn't just another Ukrainian counter-drone gadget. It's that Ukraine is turning critical infrastructure owners into part of the air defense enterprise. That's a pretty radical idea, and in a war like this, it also makes a lot of sense. But Ukraine's frontline units are stretched. Everyone who's been following this war knows that manpower is one of Ukraine's most acute problems. Every soldier standing next to an anti-drone turret outside of a factory in Kharkiv is a soldier who isn't holding a defensive line in Donetsk. Ukraine can't afford that trade-off indefinitely. Russia knows this. That's precisely why Russian strikes have shifted so heavily toward Ukrainian industrial capacity. The defense plants making drones, making missiles, and artillery shells. You can't decentralize everything. Some production requires fixed facilities, and fixed facilities are targets. So Ukraine's problem is, how do you protect the factories that build the weapons that protect the country without pulling the soldiers who are using those weapons away from the front? Well, the answer, it appears, is the private sector air defense program. Critical infrastructure companies, whether publicly or privately held, can now form their own air defense groups. They get trained and certified by the Ministry of Defense. They receive weapons and ammunition transferred from military stocks, specifically equipment that's not currently needed by frontline combat units. They operate under military command authority, and when they expend ammunition, they get resupplied through a simplified procedure. It's essentially a franchise model for air defense. Ukraine provides the doctrine, the certification, the command integration, and the ammunition resupply. The companies provide the manpower and the will to protect their own facilities. But let's talk about the actual weapons going into these private groups, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting. The first system is the Sky Sentinel, an autonomous AI-driven turret built around the M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun. Now, I talked about the Sky Sentinel before on my channel. It was one of my early viral videos, and before you picture some cobbled together Ukrainian improvisation welded together in a garage, which honestly would still probably work great, Sky Sentinel is a sophisticated purpose-built system. Here's what it does. Operators position the turret, connect it to a radar or a targeting feed, and step back. The AI takes over from there. Detect, lock, track, computer firing solution, and fire. No human pulls the trigger. The system runs the entire engagement sequence autonomously, with safety corridors and altitude limits programmed in to prevent it from engaging friendly aircraft or firing into populated areas. The engineering problem that makes this hard is something called mechanical backlash. It's the tiny amount of play or wiggle that exists in any physical mechanism. Move your gun mount 1 millimeter off, and your bullet misses a drone flying several hundred meters away. Add turret recoil, vibration from the trailer it's mounted on, and weather, and that error compounds fast. Sky Sentinel's developers say they've addressed this with 4-axis servo control, precision mounting, and shock dampening. The prototypes went through live fire trials to validate it. United 24 went on a huge fundraising campaign. These things only cost $100,000 a piece, cheap enough to scatter all around a city like Lviv or Kiev. Now here's the part that should make people sit up straight. This turret's muzzle velocity is 890 meters per second. That is fast enough to intercept cruise missiles. Caliber, KH-101, that is in their terminal flight phase. But until now, no human had reflexes fast enough to shoot down a cruise missile with a machine gun. The AI does. Sky Sentinel's effective range against low-flying threats is roughly 1.5 kilometers, which means you can stack these things around a city or build an autonomous defensive umbrella for a fraction of what a single Patriot battery costs. At about $100,000 a turret, you can field 20 of them for the cost of 3 Patriot interceptor missiles. Now that's not a slight against Patriot. Patriot handles a completely different threat category, but for Shaheds and low-flying cruise missiles, the math on Sky Sentinel is genuinely favorable in a way that high-end systems simply can't match. The second weapon showing up in these private defense groups is the Wild Hornet Sting interceptor drone. I know you've heard of those before. Ukraine produced 40,000 interceptor drones in January alone. When your counter-drone production runs at that scale, you can afford to give some to the certified private sector groups defending critical infrastructure without impacting the frontline availability. Now, here's where the command and control question comes back, because decentralized execution of air defense creates real fratricide risk. Friendly fire, right? Multiple independent shooters in the same airspace engaging the same target set without tight coordination can produce disasters. Ukraine's answer is that all private groups operate within the Armed Forces Air Force Command and Control Network. They're not autonomous in the strategic sense. They're nodes in a coordinated system who happen to be company employees rather than uniformed soldiers. Whether that integration works as advertised is still being established, but the program is in its early stages, and Ukraine's track record for iterating on early stage ideas until they work is pretty f***ing good, considering what they built over the past 4 years. So here's what this program actually represents. If you pull back far enough, you can see it clearly. Ukraine is doing something that no military doctrine anticipated. It's industrializing air defense at the societal level. Not just the military, not just the government, the private sector, trained, certified, integrated into command authority, and armed. That is now part of the defensive fabric. That's a meaningful shift. Occasionally, private security forces in other countries will carry handheld counter-drone capabilities. We're getting there. I mean, the US State Department's private security has stingers, but what Ukraine is doing is more systemic, more integrated, and more explicitly scaled for mass production of cheap drones against cheap defenses. Now, the Gulf states are experiencing this problem right now in real time, thanks to Trump's Iraq War 3, oops, wrong country, is that Gulf War 4 keeping up with the Ayatollahs. I don't remember what the name of this new war is. Man, I'm tired of the desert, y'all. You don't think the Gulf states are paying attention to Sky Sentinel and private sector air defense integration? Of course they are. Ukraine isn't just fighting a war, it's running the world's most expensive and comprehensive live test of modern air defense doctrine, and every result gets transmitted to allies and potential customers simultaneously. James Cameron imagined automated turrets in a hallway fighting aliens in 1986.
Multiple targets.
Well, Ukraine built the real version in 2025, gave it an AI brain, handed some of them to private companies, integrated the whole thing into a military command network, and started shooting down cruise missiles with machine guns in 2026. The aliens in this version are the Russians. The hallway is the Ukrainian industrial heartland, and the Marines running the system are company employees who got certified by the Ministry of Defense and are defending the factory where they work. I don't know if that's beautiful or terrifying, probably both, but what I do know is this. The countries that understand what Ukraine is building right now, not just the individual weapons, but the doctrine, the integration model, the scalable autonomy concept, those are the countries that will be ahead of the curve when this kind of threat arrives on their doorstep. And if the last decade has taught us anything, it's that these threats have a way of arriving faster than anyone planned for. That's it for today, my friends. I just launched channel memberships for those of you who would like to support these videos more directly. We're building the best global security community on YouTube. If you're new here and that's too much of a commitment because you barely know me and maybe I'm a serial killer, subscribing is always the best free way to support the channel and helps me push back on Russian disinformation, so consider it. And as always, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine.